We are living, right now, in the age of engineered distraction. This is not an accident, it is a design. Every single second of every single day, we are willingly subjecting ourselves to a relentless bombardment of stimuli. It's an invisible siege. The insistent ping of notifications that hijack our attention, the hypnotic lure of short videos, each one a tiny, fleeting hit of dopamine, the endless, frictionless scroll of social media feeds designed to have no bottom, no end, the looping, algorithmically perfected music that fills every conceivable space, the cascade of messages that demand an instant reply, creating a perpetual state of low-grade anxiety. In this world, genuine silence has become a profound anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of noise. And boredom has been rebranded as an enemy state, a vacuum to be filled, a problem to be eliminated at all costs with the nearest screen. But what if this entire narrative is a lie? What if our war on boredom is profoundly misguided? What if boredom isn't the actual problem at all? What if it's merely a symptom, a convenient mask for something far deeper, far more unsettling? What if the feeling we label as boredom is, in fact, a cleverly disguised, frantic escape from the one thing we have come to fear the most, the terrifying, unvarnished experience of being truly alone with ourselves? This is the profound and deeply uncomfortable provocation set forth by Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, neurologist, and, most critically, a survivor of the Nazi concentration camps. In his life's work, Frankl refused to settle for superficial explanations of human suffering. He looked past the immediate anxieties and into the very soul of humanity. He suggests that the pervasive feeling of emptiness, this hollow ache so common in modern life, is not a personal failure, but an existential epidemic. He argues with devastating clarity that what we lack is not more stimulation. What we lack is meaning. And here we arrive at the cruel central irony of our condition. The more desperately we try to fill this inner void with distractions, the wider and deeper it becomes. Each scroll, each click, each binge-watch series is like trying to fill a chasm with sand. And this leads us to the most uncomfortable point of all, a point of radical self-awareness. It's entirely possible, even probable, that this very video you are watching right now is part of the problem. Perhaps it is serving as yet another form of stimulation, an elegant one, an intellectualized distraction, a high-minded escape, but a distraction nonetheless. Instead of truly facing the silence within, you pressed play. Instead of daring to reflect within the emptiness, you chose to consume content about the emptiness. Frankl would have pointed out this paradox with the surgical precision of a master psychologist. We have become so conditioned to fleeing from ourselves that even the noble pursuit of self-discovery can be twisted into another sophisticated trap, another way to stay busy while avoiding the real work. So, what then is left for us? Do we simply ignore this profound discomfort, pretend it doesn't exist? Or do we muster the courage to accept that this very unease is the critical signpost, the soul's desperate signal that something essential needs to be faced? Frankl was unwavering in his belief that human beings only achieve their full potential, their very humanity, when they discover a meaning greater than their own pleasure or survival. And he was equally convinced that this meaning cannot be found in the noise. It can only emerge from a direct, unflinching confrontation with silence, with suffering, and with the stark absence of distraction. Inside the concentration camps, Frankl observed a brutal, clarifying paradox. He saw that those individuals who managed to find or create an inner purpose, a reason to endure, were able to withstand the absolutely unbearable. Meanwhile, those who lost that fragile connection to meaning, they succumbed. Their spirits broke first and their bodies soon followed, even when they were physically no worse off than their neighbors. Modern life, with all its technological marvels and material comforts, offers us a different kind of camp. It is not a camp of barbed wire and guard towers, but one of constant, algorithmically delivered dopamine. A gilded prison where the illusion of freedom lies in hitting the next button, the refresh icon, the plays command. This video, therefore, is not intended to be just another piece of content to fill your time. It is a deliberate invitation into discomfort. It is a challenge. And if you let it, perhaps it can guide you toward a reflection you have been skillfully avoiding for a very, very long time. Because in the end, that feeling you call boredom might just be your soul patiently, quietly knocking at the door. And what you choose to do with that knock, to flee from it or to finally listen, will define the entire course of your life. For Viktor Frankl, the suffering of modern humanity has a clear, distinct, and profoundly silent origin. He gave it a name, the existential vacuum. But what does that term truly mean? Let's be precise. The existential vacuum is not just a fleeting sadness, a bout of apathy, or a simple lack of motivation. It is a deep internal state of profound disorientation. It's the persistent nagging feeling that life has lost its axis, that your internal compass is spinning wildly without a true north. It is that unsettling moment when everything on the surface seems to be working. The career is stable, the relationships are present, your health is fine, your social media feed is perfectly curated, and yet, despite all the external validation, a quiet voice inside you keeps murmuring, "Is this it? Does any of this truly matter?" This vacuum doesn't just appear overnight. It is cultivated, slowly and insidiously, by the gradual collapse of traditional values, by the absence of meaningful communal rituals, by the increasing superficiality of our digital relationships, and above all, by a fundamental disconnection from a real, tangible purpose. Frankl believed with his entire being that human beings cannot live a fulfilling life merely by avoiding pain or seeking pleasure. That framework, he argued, is tragically insufficient for the human spirit. We need a why, a reason to get out of bed that transcends comfort and survival. And here we find the critical turning point. When this why is not consciously found and cultivated, it is unconsciously replaced. It gets substituted by anything that can distract us from the gnawing absence of meaning. In his powerful book, The Unheard Cry for Meaning, Frankl describes how the frantic, modern pursuit of pleasure, of status, of endless consumption, and of non-stop entertainment is, in fact, a mirror image, a reflection of the deep pain that comes from lacking a higher purpose. We live in a culture that relentlessly glamorizes hedonism and systematically trivializes silence. We have built a society that offers 24/7 entertainment on demand, yet it is a society where more and more people are living in a state of quiet, undeclared depression. The existential vacuum doesn't scream for attention. That's its insidious power. It hides. It conceals itself in empty conversations about nothing, in compulsive shopping habits, in the excessive, mindless use of social media, in the almost physical, irrational fear of being alone without a device, in the constant pressing urgency to always be doing something, anything, to avoid the stillness. Frankl famously said that unlike the classic neuroses described by Freud, which he saw as caused by internal conflicts of a sexual or emotional nature, the existential vacuum gives rise to what he termed neogenic neuroses. These are not disturbances of the psyche, but disturbances of the spirit, of the soul, caused directly by a crisis of meaning. These are the symptoms that are so difficult for modern medicine to diagnose because they don't manifest with clinical clarity. They appear as a chronic, low-grade feeling that something essential is missing, even when, by all external measures, everything seems to be perfectly in place. And the most dangerous part of this condition is that instead of addressing the root cause of this crisis, our lack of meaning, we invent ever more sophisticated artificial stimuli to suppress the symptoms. Boredom, then, reveals its true identity. It is not a state where nothing is happening. It is the echo of the soul reverberating in the emptiness, trying desperately to remind us that we are living on autopilot without a genuine direction. The problem isn't that we are without stimulus. The problem is that we are utterly saturated with it, and yet we remain profoundly empty inside. Frankl saw this not as an individual failing, but as a collective risk, a psychological epidemic poised to unravel society, and his warning today is more relevant, more urgent than ever before. A society that loses its connection with meaning becomes fragile, it becomes easily manipulable, it becomes sick, even if on the surface it projects an image of progress and normalcy. When meaning disappears, Frankl warned, human beings will cling to anything that promises to fill that terrifying void. This is the fertile ground for addictions of all kinds, for extreme and fanatical ideologies, for rampant consumerism, for self-destructive behaviors. Because it feels better to feel something, anything, even rage or despair, than to face the stark, silent emptiness of the void. But what if we reframe this entire dynamic? What if all this frantic activity, everything we call distraction, is in fact a primal survival mechanism against the unbearable pain of not knowing who we truly are? And what if, instead of constantly seeking new and more potent stimuli, the real path forward requires us to learn how to endure the silence, to sit with it, so that authentic meaning can finally emerge from its depths? This is the provocation that leads us directly to our next exploration, the modern addiction to stimuli, and how each reflexive scroll on your phone may be pushing you one step further away from your own soul. If this exploration is beginning to make sense to you, if it's striking a chord deep within, I invite you to click the subscribe button and join our community here. Your support helps us continue these vital conversations. Thank you. Imagine for a moment a laboratory rat isolated in a cage. Inside this cage is a small lever. When the rat presses this lever, it doesn't release food or water. It releases a microdose of pure dopamine directly into the pleasure centers of its brain. The animal, hypnotized by this surge of artificial bliss, begins to press the lever incessantly. It pushes it again and again and again until it reaches a state of total exhaustion. It will do this even if it means neglecting to eat, to drink, or to sleep. It will pursue the stimulus until it collapses. Now, replace the rat with a modern human, replace the cage with their apartment, and replace the lever with a glowing screen. What you have is not a far-fetched analogy, it is a brutally honest and deeply unsettling portrait of what is happening to the modern mind. This addiction to stimuli is not merely a technological phenomenon, that is too simple an explanation, it is an existential symptom. Today's society does not just offer us distractions, it manufactures them, it markets them, and it relentlessly imposes them as a fundamental lifestyle. And we, in turn, have increasingly become compulsive consumers of cheap, immediate, and ultimately unsatisfying stimuli. We have been trained, like that rat in the cage, to seek instant relief at the slightest whisper of emotional discomfort. Feeling anxious? Scroll. Feeling lonely? Post. Feeling bored? Watch. But what truly lies behind this powerful compulsion? Why has it become so profoundly difficult to spend even 5 minutes in uninterrupted silence? Why do so many of us feel an almost physical sense of anguish, a creeping panic, when we are without our phones nearby? The answer lies in something Viktor Frankl understood with a unique and chilling clarity, the deep primal fear of confronting the inner void. Every single stimulus we desperately seek, whether it's another video, a new notification, or even just background music to fill the quiet, is so often a desperate, unconscious attempt to avoid an uncomfortable foundational question: what am I actually doing with my one and only life? Frankl wrote that a human being cannot bear the absence of meaning for long. It is a psychological state as unbearable as oxygen deprivation. When that sense of meaning disappears, the individual finds themselves facing a void, an emptiness that terrifies them more than any physical pain. And so, the mind, in its cleverness, creates escape routes. In past generations, these routes might have been alcohol, or excessive work, or compulsive sexuality. Today, the escape routes are far more accessible and socially acceptable. They are the automatic feed updates, the 30-second video clips, the endless podcasts, and the pervasive illusion of being constantly productive. The crucial difference: it has never in all of human history been easier to escape from oneself. The central irony is that while we believe we are simply entertaining ourselves or passing the time, we are, in reality, numbing ourselves. We are administering a low-dose anesthetic to our own consciousness. We become physiologically dependent on this continuous stream of stimulation precisely because we have unlearned the fundamental skill of how to simply be with ourselves. Silence has become unbearable. Not because of boredom itself. Boredom is just the entry point. It's unbearable because silence opens the door to the unconscious. It allows forgotten memories, unresolved fears, and the great existential dilemmas we so masterfully avoid during the busy day to come flooding to the surface. Frankl identified this as the core of neurogenic neurosis, the neurosis that arises from the absence of meaning. This is a condition that cannot be cured with antidepressants or superficial behavioral therapies alone. It can only be overcome when the individual finds a purpose, a mission, a meaning that transcends their own ego. But here is the critical problem. This purpose cannot be accessed between one notification and the next. It requires silence, it requires presence, and above all, it requires courage. With every reflexive touch on the screen, with every algorithmically chosen distraction, we are systematically suffocating the one and only opportunity we have to listen to what truly matters. The soul, Frankl might say, does not scream, it whispers. And if we are always busy, drowning in the noise of the external world, we will never ever hear that whisper. The consequence of this is a society plagued by chronic anxiety, profound disconnection, increasingly superficial relationships, and an entire generation that feels alive because it's constantly stimulated but does not know why it is alive. And the most exquisitely ironic part is that the very act of watching a video like this can be, for many, just another form of intellectualized escape. It's a way to consume deep ideas without the difficult work of applying them. It is reflecting without acting. It is watching without truly, deeply stopping. It is here, at this juncture, that Frankl offers us a disconcerting and profoundly disturbing comparison. Because for him, true inner freedom is not found in seeking more and better stimuli. It is found in the power to resist them. And this monumental lesson did not come to him in a comfortable classroom or a quiet library. It was forged within the crucible of absolute horror, the concentration camps. That is where our journey must go next. We must explore how the total, brutal absence of stimulus forced human beings to confront their very essence, and how some, amidst unimaginable suffering, found the answer that the rest of us, in our comfort, are so desperately avoiding. Viktor Frankl did not develop his theories in a comfortable, wood-paneled office surrounded by academic books and the safety of tenure. He forged logotherapy in the deepest depths of human suffering, within the chilling confines of Nazi concentration camps like Auschwitz and Dachau. These were places meticulously designed to systematically crush human dignity, to erase freedom, and to annihilate human identity itself. And it was precisely within this environment of complete and utter deprivation that he witnessed a paradox, a phenomenon that defied all the established psychological logic of his time. He saw that some people, even when facing absolute, daily, soul-crushing horror, found an inner strength to continue living. Not out of a naive hope for an external rescue, but because they had discovered or created an internal, unassailable meaning. In the camps, everything that composed the fragile structure of modern life simply vanished. There were no distractions, no entertainment, no social media, no smartphones, no form of stimulus whatsoever that could be used to numb the excruciating pain. There was only the individual, stripped bare, exposed to raw, naked, unrelenting suffering. The mind, left with no possible escape route, was forced to look at itself. And what emerged from this terrible, involuntary confrontation was profoundly revealing. Those prisoners who could attribute some kind of meaning to their suffering, no matter how small, how personal, or how seemingly subjective, demonstrated a resilience that seemed almost supernatural. In contrast, those who could not find or create a reason to endure, even if they were physically stronger, quickly withered. Their spirit died first, often long before their bodies finally gave in. Frankl reported in his masterpiece, Man's Search for Meaning, that many prisoners died shortly after losing faith that something or someone was still waiting for them in the future. Just a single thought of surrender, the internal whisper of nothing makes sense anymore, was often enough for death to become a sudden and inevitable reality. What kept Frankl himself alive? It wasn't the abstract hope of liberation. It was a concrete, self-created purpose, the burning desire to rewrite the scientific manuscript that the Nazis had confiscated from him. It was the mission to continue his work with logotherapy, to one day help others find meaning even in the darkest of pain. His body was imprisoned, but his soul, his inner self, remained defiantly free. Why? Because he had a reason to endure the unbearable. And it is here that the paradox reveals itself with all its challenging force. While so many of us today live in unprecedented external freedom, surrounded by endless stimuli and unimaginable comforts, we are, in a profound psychological sense, more trapped than those men and women behind barbed wire. We are trapped by our screens, trapped by our distractions, and trapped by the addictions that successfully numb our pain but can never, ever heal its source. Frankl would see this with perfect clarity. The most dangerous prison of all is the one where the prisoner does not even realize they are incarcerated. In the concentration camps, silence was brutally imposed. And in that forced silence, a terrible truth emerged. In our modern world, however, silence is voluntarily, even desperately, avoided at all costs. And in doing so, we distance ourselves from the most essential truth of all, that the meaning of life will not be found out there in the world of things and experiences. It must be found in here, within. But finding this meaning requires the courage to endure absence. The absence of noise, the absence of external validation from others, the absence of constant distraction, all the things the prisoners were forced to face every single day. And this comparison, I know, may seem extreme, perhaps even uncomfortable. But it is precisely this modern disconnection between our suffering and our search for meaning that makes our world so uniquely paralyzing. We suffer, but we do so without understanding why. And because there is no apparent reason or explanation for our unease, we seek immediate relief instead of deeper understanding. Frankl saw this as a profound societal danger. A society that flees from all forms of suffering is not a healthy society. It is an infantilized society, one that consistently trades psychological depth for momentary comfort. And that is why he uttered one of his most famous dictums: when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This internal change, however, does not begin with a grand, life-altering decision. It begins with a seemingly simple, almost trivial gesture, the willingness to sit in silence, even if just for a few minutes each day, because it is in this sacred space of absence, this void we so fear, that the true self can finally emerge. And now that we understand how the total lack of stimulus forced some to confront the essence of life, we must turn and look at the other side of the coin, our saturation of stimuli as a calculated way to anesthetize this very same confrontation. This leads us directly to exploring the invisible yet devastating cost of this addiction, the slow, creeping disconnection from our authentic purpose. There is something quietly tragic and profoundly ironic about the way we live today. We have never in human history had so much access to information, to entertainment, to global connection, and to powerful tools to express ourselves. Yet, at the same time, we have never been so profoundly disconnected from our own inner lives. Viktor Frankl saw this contradiction with stunning clarity decades ago when he wrote that modern man is in a state of constant activity, not because he is genuinely productive, but because he is terrified of the prospect of being alone with his own thoughts. The consequence of this perpetual motion is both brutal and subtle. The more we grow accustomed to seeking meaning, validation, and distraction outside of ourselves, the more we atrophy the internal muscle responsible for generating meaning from within. The result is a peculiar kind of death that leaves no corpse but is a death nonetheless. It is a death that kills while we are still alive. It is the death of internal meaning. Frankl insisted that the very essence of human existence lies in our unique ability to attribute meaning to our experiences, even, and perhaps especially, when those experiences involve suffering. But this ability, this sacred human faculty, requires a type of internal silence, an inner space that has become almost impossible to find in the modern world. The constant, deafening avalanche of external stimuli interrupts any and every attempt at genuine introspection. The mind is always occupied with something, and that something is rarely, if ever, itself. This is the most dangerous death of all, the slow demise of the spirit that has simply stopped seeking its own purpose, replacing the arduous quest for depth with the easy consumption of distraction. Every notification you receive, every video you consume without conscious intention, every moment you automatically pick up your phone for no real reason at all of this may seem utterly trivial, a harmless part of daily life. But each act is like a small, subtle transfusion. It is one drop less of your inner autonomy, one more centimeter of distance from your own existential axis. Frankl warns us that the real danger is not in suffering itself. Suffering is an inevitable part of a full life. The real danger is in the absence of meaning in the face of suffering. A human being can endure immense loss, pain, crisis, and anguish. What a human being cannot bear is the suffocating feeling that all of this is in vain. And if a person does not find authentic meaning, they will desperately seek anesthesia. First, this anesthesia is subtle. It comes in the form of videos, games, social media, and a flurry of urgent tasks that ultimately lead nowhere. Then, if that fails to numb the ache, a person may turn to more corrosive forms of escape, compulsions, addictions, toxic relationships, uncontrolled consumption. All of this is part of a desperate, often unconscious attempt to silence the one question that insists on arising in the quiet moments: why do I keep living? The most devastating part of this whole process is that this disconnection from meaning rarely presents itself as overt despair. It masterfully disguises itself as normalcy. Waking up already feeling tired, living your days on autopilot, spending hours scrolling on the phone without remembering what you saw, laughing at the same repeated jokes, commenting on trivialities, and then going to bed with the familiar sinking feeling that another day was somehow wasted. All of this just seems like life, but it is not. It is the absence of life, cleverly disguised as routine. Frankl was adamant that meaning is not something you stumble upon by chance, like finding a coin on the street. It is something you must consciously build, through deliberate choices, day by day, even and especially amid suffering. But if you are living your life perpetually immersed in a sea of distractions, when, exactly, do you intend to do that building? With each new distraction you embrace, you drift a little further from the only voice that can ever guide you back to shore, the voice of your own consciousness. It is at this point that the provocation must intensify. Are you still capable of being alone for 30 minutes without any external stimulation? No phone, no music, no social media, no conversation, just you and your own thoughts. Because this simple exercise, which seems so harmless on the surface, is actually a profound spiritual test in the modern age. And for Frankl, it is precisely at this moment, in this silent confrontation, that real life finally has a chance to begin. But before we can fully face this silence, we must confront one last, uncomfortable truth. Perhaps you have turned your own journey of self-growth into yet another sophisticated distraction. And perhaps even this very video is serving as a kind of crutch, a way to feel reflective without having to actually change anything fundamental about your life. This thought leads us to our next reflection, where Frankl confronts us with one of the most direct and transformative questions a person can ever ask themselves. When was the last time you were truly, completely alone with your thoughts? If what you're hearing resonates on a deep level, you'll find real practical value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Carl Jung's core ideas into accessible concepts, whilst Dialogues with the Unconscious provides a 30-day practical path to apply them in your own life. You can find both linked in the pinned comment below. Viktor Frankl famously wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. But what happens when that precious space has been systematically invaded? What if you have lost the very ability to inhabit it? What happens when there is no longer a space between stimulus and response, but only an automatic, conditioned reaction? A reaction conditioned by notifications, by cravings for social approval, by the impulsive, twitchy need for distraction. The answer is simple, and it is devastating. You cease to be a conscious human being and become a mere reflection. You become a reactive organism, not a self-aware individual. You exist, but you do not truly inhabit your own mind. Silence, today, is an unexplored territory, and for that very reason, it is a sacred one. It is in that silent space that real thought begins. It is there that genuine consciousness emerges. It is there that meaning can finally be heard, but only if there is enough courage to sustain the absence of noise. The stark reality is that most people today do not just avoid silence, they actively fear it. They fear what might arise from the depths. They fear what uncomfortable truths they might finally hear. Frankl, however, saw silence not as a punishment, but as a laboratory of the soul, a consecrated space where the human being is confronted with what is most authentic within them, and therefore often what is most uncomfortable. The absence of distraction unmasks everything, our deepest insecurities, our internal lies, our glaring inconsistencies, and our poorly healed wounds. And that is precisely why silence needs to be protected, to be cultivated, even if it hurts at first. But how? How do we possibly do this in a world that financially rewards distraction and culturally punishes boredom? How do we relearn the ancient art of being with ourselves without stimuli, without the instant hit of dopamine, without the compulsive need to be doing something all the time? Here are some concrete practices, simple in theory, but truly transformative in their execution for those who wish to begin this pilgrimage back to inner silence. 1. Schedule emptiness. Yes, I mean this literally. Put a block of time in your daily calendar, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, and label it nothing. And then you must take it as seriously as any other appointment. During this time, no phone, no music, no reading, no tasks. Just you, sitting or lying down with your own thoughts. It will feel excruciatingly uncomfortable at first. Your mind will race. Your body will itch for a distraction. That discomfort is precisely why it is necessary. 2. Take aimless walks without headphones. Go for a walk without a defined destination, without listening to a podcast, without making an audio call. Simply walk, listening to the ambient sounds of the street, the wind in the trees, the rhythm of your own footsteps. It is often in this state of aimless wandering that our truest and most creative ideas finally rise to the surface. 3. Create a ritual of silence upon waking. Before your hand reflexively reaches for your phone, before you check a single message or email, just sit on the edge of your bed for 5 minutes and simply breathe. Observe what your mind is producing on its own, without any external interference. This simple, foundational habit can redefine the quality and intention of your entire day. 4. Write whatever comes, completely unfiltered. Keep a notebook handy. During these periods of scheduled silence, grab it and write down everything that is swirling in your mind. Your fears, your fragmented ideas, your anger, your desires, your confusion. This is a raw portrait of your soul before it gets silenced by the next wave of external stimuli. Do not judge it, do not edit it, just write. 5. Endure the discomfort without fleeing. When that powerful, almost physical urge to check your phone just for a second hits you, do not give in. Instead, observe it. Watch the urgency arise within you like a wave. Feel it fully as a physical impulse in your body, and then consciously choose not to react. It is right there, in that tiny moment of resistance, that you begin to rebuild the sacred space between stimulus and response. These practices are not mere wellness exercises or productivity hacks. They are quiet, daily acts of rebellion. They are powerful ways to declare to yourself that you refuse to be just another product in the attention economy, that you are willing to do the hard work of reclaiming your psychological depth, that you want to relearn how to think, to feel, and to exist without constantly needing something outside of you to keep you entertained. And it is in this rediscovered silence that something profound begins to transform. At first, it all seems useless, uncomfortable, even unsettling. But over time, with persistence, you begin to notice something subtle. You notice the return of a forgotten voice, your own. It is the part of you that does not want to be fed by more stimuli, but by genuine purpose. The part that has been trying to speak to you all along, but could never be heard because there were simply too many other things happening. And it is precisely this part, this quiet inner core, that Frankl believed to be the ultimate source of true, unshakable inner freedom. But to hear it, you must stop fleeing. You must face the final and most important challenge, to accept that the very emptiness you fear so much may be the exact place where your life, your real life finally begins. This is what we will explore now in our final part, why stopping the escape is the only possible path forward, and how the silence you so desperately avoid may actually be the answer you have always been seeking. The greatest tragedy of modern life is not our suffering, it is our forgetting. We forget who we truly are, beneath the layers of social conditioning and digital noise. We forget why we started on our paths in the first place. We forget that there exists a part of us that wants nothing to do with applause, with likes, or with endless distractions. It wants only one thing, truth. And that part of you has been speaking to you for a very long time, but you silence it with headphones. You drown it in an ocean of videos. You numb it with a constant stream of notifications. It does not scream. It does not force the door open. It simply waits. It waits with infinite patience, silent in the small spaces between your thoughts, in the deep discomfort of your boredom, in the insomnia that insists on returning when the world around you is finally quiet. Viktor Frankl never asked anyone to find the meaning of life in books, in gurus, or in pre-packaged ready-made answers. On the contrary, he claimed with absolute conviction that meaning cannot be a givens to you. It must be discovered, it must be created, it must be built piece by piece in direct, courageous confrontation with reality, no matter how harsh or how empty that reality may seem. And this sacred construction can only begin at the precise moment you stop running. The question is not if you are fleeing. The vast majority of people are. The only real question is, until when? Until when will you continue to avoid being truly alone with your own thoughts? Until when will you fill every last pocket of silence with external stimuli? Until when will you accept living a life that is full of frantic movement, but utterly empty of authentic meaning? Frankl believed that every human being, even the most wounded, the most lost, the most profoundly confused, still possesses one final sacred choice, the choice to say yes to life. But this yes is not something shouted on social media or celebrated with fireworks. It happens in the deepest silence. It happens when you finally stop, turn inward, look at the chaos and the emptiness and decide, I will no longer run away from this. The emptiness you fear so much is not your enemy. It is the portal. It is the sacred, fertile space where the new can finally be born. And if you are brave enough to sit in that silence and truly listen to what it has to say, you will eventually discover something that no video, no book, no teacher can ever give you. You are not broken. You are simply disconnected from your own essence. It is in this silence that your soul speaks, and it is speaking to you right now. And that is why, in this specific video, I am not going to recommend that you watch the next one. Today, I want to invite you to do something radical. I want you to close this tab, to turn off your phone, to go to a quiet place, take one deep breath, and just stay with everything you have heard and felt here. Do not run away from the discomfort that may arise. Explore it. And tomorrow, or the day after, when you come back, I want you to tell me in the comments what happened. What did you feel? What came to the surface? Because perhaps for the first time in a very long time, you will have stopped distracting yourself and you will have started to truly live.